Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 20th, 2017. That's special election day in Georgia's 6th district. So everybody has been eagerly awaiting the outcome of this one. Fingers crossed for what appears to be a real toss-up of an election. It's a little bit disappointing to even have to be able to acknowledge that what has essentially become a referendum on the secret non-healthcare bill, the secret tax bill, Republicans are hoping to jam through next week, and the totally incompetent presidency of Donald Trump all comes down to a referendum that is a straight-up toss-up. But as we've been reminded numerous times over the course of this crazy special election by Greg Dworkin, this is a red district. It's been a Republican district for a long, long time, and it would have shocked anybody a year ago to say that a Democrat would even be within single digits of losing. So the idea that there's an actual toss-up, yeah, I know. But moral victories, well, okay, they're interesting. It's nice to have them. It would be better to have a real victory. Of course, if you know anybody, anywhere in the 6th District of Georgia, by all means, give them a call. Certainly remind anybody to vote. And fingers crossed for being able to pull this one out. It would be terrific. Everyone would love it if that was possible. And all eyes will be on it. So a win would be quite helpful, I think, in all this. Of course, it wouldn't do much to stop things in the Senate, which is where the activity is now on what's being called the health care bill. But we really need to, I guess, stop making that mistake. It's a little late in the process to try and correct this stuff. But as you know, this is, I think, best described as a tax bill masquerading as a health care bill. It certainly doesn't do anything in the way of offering anybody easier access to health care, so I guess it's a little bit silly to even refer to it that way. And the chief aim of the thing seems to be repealing the taxes that were passed as a method of paying for what became the Affordable Care Act, chiefly because they're opposed to any sorts of taxes and because they fall on their constituencies or their moneyed constituencies anyway. And as a result, having removed the payment mechanisms from the situation, of course, they can't continue to operate the programs and policies that these taxes paid for, because of course the funding is gone. You could of course, seek alternative sources of funding, but that's not what they're interested in doing. So they'll take away the funding first and reward people on the right end of the spectrum from their point of view with the money back from their taxes. And then, lo and behold, gee whiz, we just can't pay for this other program anymore, and so it goes away too, sort of by coincidence. So the idea that it's even a repeal and replace bill is a bit of a joke too. All right. Let's see. Let's catch up with things all around us. Things are happening all around us, and it's time to catch up with some of them. And let's see, I haven't seen any Twitter rants this morning from the president. They probably told him to keep quiet until maybe the election is affecting it. I don't know. Or it may be that it's finally getting through to him, that it's not the media who are begging him to stop tweeting. It's his own supporters who are begging him to stop tweeting. Anyway, we move forward with another show today. As you know, if you follow us on Twitter, Bill keeps us up to date from Portland, Maine. Daily Coast Radio is live now. That's what all this babble has been about to this point. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. We'll be broadcasting everything today behind closed doors. Stay out. Penchant for secrecy among the Trump family and the Trump White House spreads to the Congress. Everyone is sort of walking around dumbfounded that they're about to pass a major bill that they have no idea what's in it. It's been written essentially by Mitch McConnell alone. Yes, he assembled a team of 13 people to do exactly what he asked. They mixed and matched as much as they could out of the grab bag of cutting taxes and eliminating the services that those tax dollars provided. and put together, I don't know, something that was in writing and that they were able to forward, I guess, at some point to the CBO and discuss with the parliamentarian. They don't really care what it does. Just so long as something passes, something happens, they'll simply point to it and say, that's it. We got one of those things, one of those really highly successful bills that we put together. So we await word on what's actually in it, I guess. The Democrats in the Senate have been doing their best to push back on the steamroller, but it's just, we warned up front that it was going to be difficult. The reconciliation procedure makes it impossible to filibuster this thing by traditional means. There are things that we can do to make things more difficult and slow the process down somewhat, and they're being done, and there's been some reporting. As a matter of fact, let me scroll through the reporting from yesterday's front page at Daily Kos. Joan McCarter, who you might imagine was on the case, in fact was, and she can perhaps tell us a little bit more about it yesterday. The last update on it from late last night, Democrats in hour 5 of Trump Care Talkathon with message to GOP, you're breaking the Senate. And that's obviously, it's true. And I help break the Senate from time to time myself. So I guess I can tell you, how did Trump put it? I alone can fix it. I alone can break it. I alone can tell you when people are breaking things, I guess. Although you probably have a pretty good sense of it yourself. But let's take a look at what Joan posted for us late last night and scroll down a bit here. Senate Democrats are moving into hour 5 of their talkathon against Trump Care and against the deeply undemocratic process Mitch McConnell is following to ram it through. You know all about it, of course, from the Senate floor, on Facebook, and on Twitter with the hashtag #HoldTheFloor, if you're interested in following along. Democratic senators continue to rally the grassroots to fight this bill. This is the longest discussion you're likely to see on Trump care, or Trump non-care, as some others say, from the Senate, and it's being conducted by Democrats who have been utterly shut out of the process of crafting this thing. They weren't even able to show up and provide their votes in opposition to anything because nothing was voted on in committees. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut demanded better. Of course, and why not? Why are my constituents not allowed to see the details of what's about to happen to their lives? He asked. And it's a good question, isn't it? My constituents, even though they're represented by Democrats, have no less rights than the citizens of Iowa or the citizens of Texas, who are represented by Republicans. Why are my constituents not allowed to see the details of what's about to happen to their lives? Why are only a select group of Americans able to have a voice inside that room? Why are the people of Connecticut going to get 3 minutes to look at this bill once it hits the Senate floor? My constituents are Americans, just like the constituents in Republican states are Americans. They deserve to know what's about to happen to them. You're breaking the Senate, and it won't get put back together that easily. And he's absolutely right about that. And you know who else thinks he's absolutely right about that? It's really kind of interesting. You may have seen circulating on Twitter over the last 24 hours or so the 2010 tweet of, the man who is now Governor Mike Pence, or was then, I guess. Was he governor in 2010? I don't know if he was. I guess so. Although, who knows? I don't know when he started his Twitter feed and all. Anyway, for whatever reason, it's still identified that way, and I guess I got to take a look at that. Now I want to know for sure, because you know how I am about these things. I can't just state that and say, well, we'll have someone check it out. I'll have to check it out. Mike Pence, might as well take a look at the Wikipedia and give us a view of when he was in which office, and does it match up with his Twitter handle or not? Let's see. So, of course, he's vice president now. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah, okay. He was the 50th governor of Indiana from 2013 to 2017. He was in the House, which is why he would have even bothered to raise an eyebrow at the health care bill in 2010. As governor of Indiana, he likely would have ignored it unless he was chairman of the Republican Governors Association and had reason to comment on everything that was going on in Washington. But, okay, it's being tweeted, or it's retrievable now under his Governor Mike Pence Twitter handle, even though he's not the governor anymore. You tell me what's going on. Anyway, the most important part of it, I think, really would be the substance, and that was that he had said it was simply wrong. It's simply wrong for legislation that will affect 100% of the American people to be negotiated behind closed doors. And he's, of course, referring to healthcare. It was hashtagged at the time HCR, healthcare reform, because there was some real healthcare reform going on in the Affordable Care Act. No longer the case here in the American Healthcare Act. No healthcare available anywhere to be found in that bill. But, Richard Cranium, our buddy at Daily Kos and listener to the show, reminding us Twitter never forgets. So he let us know this morning, just dropping it in our morning post as one of the comments. Just going to drop this here, he said. Well worth taking a look at. It reminded me, of course, of the other tweet being circulated from John Cornyn, also from the same time period. Let's see, Pence was on the 13th of January, 2010. But nearly a week prior, wow, a whole week, John Cornyn beat him to the punch, writing, "The people have a right to know what is happening behind closed doors with secret healthcare negotiations." That was how John Cornyn felt in 2010, but I don't know, whatever, in 2017. Shoes on the other foot, and I guess they just decided people don't really need to know. By the way, how bad could it get in terms of literally not knowing what's in the bill until the last possible minute? What is the last possible minute? Two possibilities here, main possibilities, and then, of course, a range of possibilities in between these two poles here. But neither one offers significant opportunity for reading the bill and analyzing it, and certainly not mounting any sort of counterattack. And the first and most conventional path is, of course, they'll be using reconciliation either way. The most conventional path at this point, the most conventional path really is, would be to hold hearings and mark up a bill and send it to the floor. But they're not doing that. But from this point forward, they could, of course, report out or, release the text of the bill, which would be nice, ahead of time, and say, this is what we're working towards, and the CBO has got it, and the CBO is scoring it, and the score is XYZ. Here's the text. Let's go. And you begin 20 hours of permissible debate under the Budget Act for a reconciliation bill. And you debate for a while, and then you go through a raft of amendments, and somewhere, let's say, 24 to 48 hours following the commencement of consideration of the bill itself, we have our vote. Now, again, under normal circumstances, you would adhere to Senate rules and norms that would compel you to release the text of the bill 2 days before it begins floor consideration, and everyone would read it. And, at a minimum, you'd have a day or two. As a matter of fact, off the top of my head, I can't remember what the rule is, but typically speaking, you have to go through the readings process, and that takes, depending on how you rig the process, between 24 or 48 hours to get all that done. And, in addition to giving people a minimum amount of time to read the bill, it's just, regular, that's just the normal procedure. Everybody gets a moment to reflect on what's going on. You can make people aware of what's happening on the floor. You can schedule the debate. You can review the bill, et cetera, et cetera. Mostly it's been reviewed in the public view through the committee process. I'm being distracted here by, I guess the other news of the morning is that Sean Spicer is no longer going to serve as White House press secretary. He's instead being moved. He's staying in the communications department, but we've discussed this on the show before. There's an actual difference between White House press secretary and White House communications director. Slightly different communications job. That means he's not going to be the guy on camera telling everybody to shut up and sit down and you're all wrong and you're all a bunch of liars, etc. Someone else will take that job. which of course gives the news media the opportunity to say on most networks, Sean Spicer is being, as Jim Roberts writes here, in Blue America, Spicer is retreating from public view. In Red America, Spicer gets a promotion. So, I mean, in a way, I guess, moving to communications director could be, I don't know, you want to view it as a promotion, but basically they gave him his shot and Trump couldn't stand it anymore. So, Spicer's out, and that's distracting me. Anyway, the health care bill was what we were discussing. Normally, the committee markup and voting and reporting process would at least have given wonks in the policy area a glimpse of what's in the bill, and they would digest it the best they could and disseminate that information, but we haven't had that opportunity. Then on top of that, you get the 2 days or so to read through the bill while we're waiting for a newly reported bill to go over, as I said, to go over under the rule, which is a very weird way of saying things, but basically a short waiting period to give everybody the opportunity to get set up for the debate. And then the 20 hours of debate, usually longer, but again, reconciliation limits the debate time by statute, and then you'll have your vote. There is another way, however, to really, really leverage the rules to actually keep the bill's text secret for even longer. And it's very sneaky, and it's very rotten, and it's the sort of thing, it's one of those things where if you had suggested it, most often, if you had suggested it to Harry Reid, for instance, and he had some particular reason to flout all norms of public participation and public knowledge of the public's business in the Senate, he would have said, no, I see what you're getting at, but that's just not done. And we don't know whether McConnell will bother with something like this. At this point, he might as well just go with the procedure that gives people literally a day or so and no more to review this bill and then to do nothing about it, because it's going to be forced down our throats for the most part anyway, unless there are unforeseen Republican defections. That, of course, is the hope of everyone who insists that you be calling your senators both Democratic and Republican if you have them. By the way, don't fake being from another state. It doesn't actually do anything. But it's entirely possible. If one more Republican senator just gets the idea that this is garbage, it's a horrible bill, and there's no possible benefit to anyone in America from it, and I'll probably lose my seat, if I vote for it, then that would be enough to get rid of the bill. That would be enough to sink it. It's that close. Anyway, the sneakier way, if you really wanted to do everything you could to keep it from public view until the last possible second, would be to bring a different bill to the floor, either the House text or something close to it, or just some sort of what is essentially a decoy text. And you can begin the 20-hour clock debating the bill, and you can basically engineer it so that at the very end of the 20 hours statutorily set aside for the debate of the bill, the majority leader uses his ability to get preferential floor recognition to wait for pretty much the last second, the 19th hour and 59 minutes, to rise and say, hey, I've got an amendment to the bill. And here it is. And it's the real text of what they really were going to bring forward, was what they really intended to pass, but they hid until the last possible minute in the debate and then pull out, and all of a sudden, guess what? I'm offering it as a substitute amendment. I'm going to strike everything after the enacting clause of this bill and substitute this entirely new language, and we're just going to force it through on party line vote, and that's going to be that, and you're not even really going to get a chance to look at it at all. Now, there's some restrictions in this, and I'm not, again, offhand, I'm not exactly sure what the rules are in terms of the timing and the submission of amendments. There are, in fact, standing Senate rules which ordinarily require that amendments to be considered be submitted in writing beforehand. And I know that when it's For instance, when they are amendments being offered to a bill that's operating under cloture, on which cloture has been invoked, and so you therefore have a time limit on remaining debate. You have to have filed your amendments a certain point, at some certain point in time before the post-cloture timing runs out. In other words, you can't. There are mechanisms under normal procedures for preventing you from springing a total surprise amendment at the last minute, and there likely are requirements under the reconciliation procedures about those amendments as well that may have to be submitted the day before, by the day before floor consideration, or sometimes later, or an hour after, and the deadline sometimes falls an hour after beginning consideration of the bill, etc., things like that. So under normal procedures, it wouldn't be possible to simply spring things at the last possible minute. Now, if you're willing to throw all the norms out the window and you can line up your votes such that you can, if you could suspend the rules, I mean, that takes a 2/3 vote in the Senate, so they don't have anything to do like that. But I mean, if you opted to essentially nuclear option the whole thing from start to finish, you could, of course, change or suspend the rules or demand a different interpretation of them for the time being anyway, such that it would be allowed to offer up a complete substitute amendment at the last minute, simply because a majority says so. I don't know if you could get the votes together for all of that, but I would have said that you can't ordinarily get the votes together for this kind of violation of norms and procedures either, and especially when you're working with a margin of just 52 in the Senate, and they have managed to do it to date. Lots of complaints. That's been the key feature of coverage of the consideration of this bill for the last week or so, has been finding Republican senators, some of whom are happy enough to put their name on the record, saying that they're terribly unhappy with this procedure. And everyone, to the credit of the journalists, everyone I've seen writing about it does stop and point out, the margins being as thin as they are, and you not being able to count on, perhaps, as the rumors go, that Susan Collins, yeah, right, maybe, and Murkowski, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, are holdouts, likely to vote against the bill. That would give you the thinnest possible margin and land you on a 50-50 vote if everybody else votes according to party affiliation, or loose affiliation anyway, in the case of the independents in the Senate. And that would leave it up to Vice President Mike Pence to cast the deciding vote, 51-50, and the bill would carry that way. You can't lose another Republican senator if you lose those two. And any one of them then, in combination with the two holdouts, who likely feel the same way, could have a total of 3 Republican senators could have gone to the leadership and said, listen, without the 3 of us, you lose 50-49. There are 50 no votes and 49 yes votes, and the vice president can't save you. And essentially our demand is this: you just got to open up the process. This is embarrassing, and we can't adequately answer our constituents who say, what are you up to? Why is everything secret? This is just too embarrassing for us. The problem, with working that deal, of course, is that then the majority leader would then expect that if he opened up the process, that he would get your vote in the end. You would be satisfied with the outcome. And perhaps that's our first and only clue as to the sincerity of Murkowski and Collins in terms of their purported opposition to the bill. I have my doubts for some reason about Collins, just because history. Murkowski, not particularly consistent with this stuff either, but does show up more often than not as a no vote once she's threatened to be a no vote seriously. She typically does follow through. Collins, I think, is a little less consistent with that. And, of course, Marco Rubio is the one who's totally inconsistent with it. He always says, I'm very disturbed, and then all of a sudden he finds his way clear to voting yes, just like John McCain. And, his whole thing falls apart. Occasionally Collins shows up with this. Murkowski as well. But if there are no votes on the substance, how do you get the majority leader to open up the process in exchange for their no vote? He's not particularly interested in it. In order to make that work, you'd have to, in the negotiations, have a third senator who was willing to say, I am potentially a yes vote on this legislation, and I'll vote to put it over the top if there's a more open process first. I just need the cover of a more open process. And there may just, I guess, without widespread knowledge of what's in the bill so that you can commit to being a yes on it, if you have any doubts at all about what's going on, you're probably a very shaky anything. Yes, no, whatever it may be. And there might not be very many Republican senators in the position to work with Murkowski and Collins to approach McConnell and say, I'm still interested in voting for this bill, but I need the cover of public hearings in order to do it, and I'll guarantee you a yes vote in the end. You'll get what you need out of this deal if you'll just open up the process. Who's in a position to say that right now? Who knows what they're getting into, knows what they'd be committing to. I guess, I guess the flip side of that is, I guess that must mean that it's possible that there are a significant number of Republican senators who could find themselves shocked to find out what the hell is in this thing and say, what? If I had known that all along, I would have been a hard no from the beginning. But then you're talking about Republicans. You'd have to find a Senate Republican who was interested in preventing, the lasting damage that's going to be done to their constituencies, and care about that in order to find somebody who could fill that role. It's not actually all that easy to do. I mean, you only have 50 to choose from, and, well, so many of them are despicable scumbags. It's very difficult to find somebody. So, I don't know. I guess the only positive thing to take out of it is that might mean that there are more shaky Republicans than we know. Then there are, of course, dozens of scumbags that can't wait to do this to people. So, we'll see. Has Collins said she wanted public hearings? Gideon asks. I am not positive. You know what? I kind of stopped paying attention to what she was saying. She's always just rolls out the same gobbledygook about how she's deeply concerned or deeply troubled about something. I think so. And there have been a number of senators who have. And, one of the better observations along the way, did I put it aside? I don't know if I did or not. I have so many tweets that I thought were interesting that I put aside along the way, and it's difficult to identify them in pocket. But I think it might have been Chris Hayes who was pointing out, when the House was crafting their bill in secret and wasn't letting anybody see it, Rand Paul made a huge press stunt out of going over, like roaming the halls. He had himself videotaped roaming the halls of the basements of the office buildings on the House side, looking for the document room and looking for copies of the bill, and that he brought a copier with him and he was going to make copies of it and distribute it, and how dare they, and I'm for openness because libertarian, blah, blah, blah. And now the bill is being written in secret on the Senate side, where he actually has some power to do something about it. And it's funny, there have been no YouTube videos of him looking for the text at all. He's not interested in turning it up all of a sudden. So, your basic fake libertarian, no surprise there. But still kind of shocking to see it so explicitly, played out this way. Everybody this morning I see complaining about Bob Corker doing the same thing, saying, gee whiz, I wish this had been a more open process. But, yeah, I don't know. It was worth considering. It might not be all that simple a calculation to simply say we demand open hearings, because the people you're demanding open hearings of are going to want something in return. And if you're not a yes vote, and they can't pick up the signal from you that you will be, then there's really no reason to offer them those hearings. Of course, there are other reasons to not offer them the hearings. And Occam's razor, I suppose, demands that we actually land on, as our final answer here, the reason that there aren't any public hearings is, 1, they don't care. 2, they're somewhat embarrassed about what's in there. And 3, they think that would simply raise opposition. It would make it more uncomfortable to pass this terrible thing if people knew ahead of time and could lobby us against it. And that it just comes down to that. That's the most likely explanation still. Let's see. We have Michael Musson's comment that says the president will happily throw Republican senators under the bus when the Affordable Care Act proves completely unpopular. Well, it says ACA. Do we mean AHCA, the American Health Care Act, the Trump Care Bill, and not the Affordable Care Act? Although he'd be happy to throw anybody under any bus whenever anything becomes unpopular, I'm sure, whether he has something to do with it or not. Wonder if it will affect votes. And it's a good question. There are certainly senators contemplating that right now. Although they're unscrupulous jerks, they're not often completely blind to the electoral impact of such things. That's the one thing that they are often tuned into very closely. All right. So what could they do? They could wait until the last minute to reveal the text and then consider the actual final product that they intend to pass as the base bill and then open it up to amendment. Or they could bring something other than what they really intend to pass, either completely different or the same in substance with the exception of one particularly egregious or 2 or 10 particularly egregious provisions that they intend to introduce only at the last second and push through on a party line vote. But even to do that, if you really are interested in passing the thing, and I guess that's probably some of the calculation too, there's been some speculation that maybe, as Greg mentioned, maybe for some reason Mitch McConnell just wants the thing to come to a vote, and if it doesn't pass, whatever, it's off my plate, I don't care. At this point, he's done so much to try and tip the scales and get the thing passed and help his members avoid embarrassment that it's hard to believe that he wouldn't want a victory in substance as well. But I guess anything's possible. But in order to, if he cares about passing it, in order to do something like a last minute substitution, he would have to be 100% sure with these razor thin margins that he had those votes lined up. He would have to reveal at some point to the Republican caucus conference, as they call it, exactly what he had in mind and say, I'm going to shield you as long as possible, but in exchange for that, I need you to show up on this vote for the substitute amendment at the last minute. I have to let you know that it's happening so that you're not shocked into somehow losing your mind and voting no on this thing. But, I need to get my ducks in a row beforehand. I could just spring it on you, but senators tend to react badly to that when it happens from their own side. You don't care so much, of course, about the reactions of the other side. You're not counting on their votes anyway. So the question is whether he has revealed plans to the rest of the conference to do something like that. And it's entirely possible. I can't tell you from the public clues because it's also possible that you bring that out and then members say, well, listen, I understand what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to keep the heat off of us for as long as possible. And the problem, of course, with that is it's uncomfortable, and I hear from people at home, how dare you support this secretive process? So I need to be able to say during this secretive process that I'm against this secretive process. I'll be there to vote for the bill in the end, and I'll live with the consequences of having to defend this piece of garbage. I can do that. I just will simply lie to people and say it's great. I can handle that part. But along the way, I need to be able to say I'm against this secrecy. So if that's cool with you, I'll give you the thumbs up now. You're going to have my vote on the last minute substitution so long as you give me all the latitude I need to say that this process is terrible and maybe even that I blame you for it. And Mitch McConnell may be able to, warm up to that deal if he thinks he's going to get the yes vote. So it's very hard to read the public clues, and it's very hard to find a way to reason out why Republicans in this situation would actually act independently. He may have given the pass to Collins and Murkowski, or may have given them up for lost in all this, but just so long as he has the 50. But with those other 50, he's going to be iron-fisted. That's all we can really tell you at this point. Michael Musson says, yes, of course, it was in fact the HCA that he meant. So, okay, it's easy enough. I mean, all it is an extra H. And that's a red herring anyway, because there's no health care in the bill. So, we forgive you for that. Let's see. Other things that I wanted to bring up today, other fun and interesting tweets, little news stories. Let's see. We'll put on the record that yesterday Trump did his little sit down in front of the fireplace in the Oval Office with the president of Panama. And all he could think of about Panama, so that he had a comment to make, was they were having their pictures taken in front of the fireplace, and he made the little weird hand gesture in front of his man-spread legs, was that, gee whiz, the Panama Canal, how about that thing, right? We did a pretty good job building that, to which, of course, the president of Panama said, yeah, 100 years ago, that was really great. But literally, it was almost assuredly the only thing that Donald Trump knew off the top of his head about Panama. There, remains the possibility. Well, let's see, Panama, isn't Panama Jack a brand of like suntan oil and sunglasses and clothing line or something? Maybe I've heard of that one. Somebody suggested that maybe he knew the Van Halen song Panama, but I don't think so. I think he was a bit of a disco guy in his day, and not necessarily a Van Halen fan, but who knows? Couldn't tell you for sure, but otherwise I think that's the extent of his Panama knowledge, and it's just goddamn embarrassing that he's the president. I also, I've been wondering, I didn't keep track of this because it wasn't so frequently a forum for exhibiting the stupidity of a sitting president before, but did other presidents spend so much of their time and so many of their first days in office meeting with the heads of state of other countries? I mean, it's a common enough role. Obviously, the president of the United States is going to meet the heads of state of lots of them, if not the majority of the leaders of other countries. I just don't recall ever seeing such an intensive schedule of it for a new president. And I don't know whether I am simply paying more attention to it, or maybe it's hard not to pay so much attention to it because there's nothing else of substance going on, and this is barely substantive work as it is. Witness what I just told you about. Here, you're going to meet the president of Panama. For an ordinary president to hold this many meetings would be, it's not hard work in the sense that, it's not come up with a healthcare plan. That's tough. It's, exchange pleasantries, shake hands, talk in general terms, have some pictures taken, etc. It's part of the job, but it's the easiest possible work. I ask because I have the feeling that the staff are just filling his days with these things and signings of executive orders and other various memoranda that have no legal impact or certainly don't legally, there's no legal reason to have a signing of anything, much less a signing ceremony. And I think that these are just sort of fake staged events that look vaguely presidential that they're able to fill Trump's days with. I don't remember Obama meeting every world leader they could come up with in the first 150 days of his presidency. But Again, it might be that I don't remember it because if he had sat down with the president of Panama, he would have had the same 5 to 10 minutes in front of the fireplace and in front of the cameras to say things like, we're looking forward to reaffirming the strong working relationship between our countries. Of course, if there was any mention of the Panama Canal, it would have been, of course, Panama as host to the Panama Canal is one of the key players in world commerce and blah, 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 and the safety and security of the region is of paramount concern. We talked about that. We talked about regional security and regional cooperation, and of course, one of our chief regional concerns, combating the flow of illegal drugs, blah, 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 and yada, yada. And they might have talked about, I don't know, possibly, I guess, talk about the Panama Papers, etc. Possibly the only other reason that Donald Trump would ever have heard Panama mentioned, and he may only know about it because he's probably implicated by the Panama Papers in some way. Anyway, but that probably hasn't even reached his consciousness. But there would be 5 minutes of nothing talk, light chatter, but it would be better disguised as substantive. Whereas here, the only conversation is, hey, how about that canal? Isn't that great? Didn't we do a good job building that? And so it stands out in our minds. I mean, when he had the Prime Minister of Italy and he said, Italy, there's a lot of great stuff. I love pizza and spaghetti is terrific. And I know Luciano Pavarotti is dead. I knew it was a great friend of mine, like Frederick Douglass, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I've taken note more closely of his stupid meetings with other members, and I'm just wondering whether they're filling his days with this crap or not, or I just gave a pass to previous presidents about these things. If you know, let me know. Anyway, just wanted to enter that one onto the record. Let's see. Other things. Man, there's been a lot in the last couple of days. Let's see. Oh, yes. Here's something that we got to enter on the record. I saw Armando tweet this one yesterday, with a comment. This is the tweet of Billy House, who tweets as House in Session, a congressional correspondent for Bloomberg News, on Devin Nunes and his interview that he gave to a Fresno radio station, in which he said, quote, I never recused myself, that is, never recused myself from the Russia investigation of the oversight committee that he chairs in, or the intelligence committee that he chairs in the House. He says, I never recused myself. This was essentially made up by the media. And that is interesting. My first reaction is, what a liar, what a scumbag. I can't believe it. And really do have to get rid of this guy, or at least unseat him as chair, since he's never stopped meddling in this investigation. However, in retweeting that and thinking about it and reading about it a little bit more, I did get another tweet came to my attention. This one from Gavin Ivester, who is let's see. He's I guess what we would charmingly refer to as a private citizen, in the sense that he is not a working journalist, but just one of us regular people on Twitter. And he points out, you know what? I can't find where he ever used the word, I guess, recused. I can't find where he recused himself. He stepped aside on that one investigation, and Gavin points out it was pretty carefully worded. It was other people who said recused, and we may have only ourselves to blame on that one. That would be interesting, especially interesting if it was engineered that way for that specific purpose. I didn't say I was going to recuse myself. That brings a very clear legal connotation, whether it's binding or not. There's a real understanding of what recusal means. I said step aside. That doesn't mean I'm not going to handle things. It just means I'm going to handle them from over here on this side of the room. And that's a very different thing. And maybe we fooled ourselves. Maybe the norms, which would ordinarily have demanded recusal, left us satisfied with the mention of stepping aside, which we took to mean recusal, because normally it would have meant recusal in this situation for anyone else. But for this guy, apparently not. So on the record, and we should probably pay some more attention to it and look up the record and see if our findings are in agreement with Gavin's here. Good find there, I think. Certainly, well, it's truthy enough. I could believe that that's the case. I just don't know off the top of my head. I'll take your word for it for the time being, and we'll see if we can't solidify it and verify your research at some point. Let's see. Karen D tells us she lived in Panama. Everybody I know lived somewhere else. Okay, well, having lived in Panama, you can't underestimate the effect of Trump's idiotic remark. Friendship between the USA and Panama is begrudging. I see. Grudgingly given. Yeah, I don't imagine the Panamanians are super thrilled with the United States ever. I mean, I guess because 100 years ago we just said, everyone here, STFU, we're building our canal here, and a lot of you probably will work on it and die. And furthermore, we're going to control it forever. And it wasn't until, well, yeah, I think everybody remembers the Jimmy Carter episodes in which he actually did the fair and right international thing, and everybody said, how dare you give away our amazing advantage that we have taken over Panama and world commerce because it's fair. Whatever. Anyway, so between that and, of course, invading the country and arresting their, admittedly, certainly unpopular here in the United States, their president, Manuel Noriega. You know what? As a clear sign of the continued American arrogance toward Panama and all of Central America, I don't think I could tell you what Panamanian public opinion of Noriega was prior to his removal. It never entered the conversation. And although I'd be inclined to say, well, it certainly wouldn't be difficult to imagine that whenever you have somebody who rules more or less autocratically, they're not going to be terribly popular, at least secretly among the populace, but who knows? I don't remember, and I probably shouldn't presume as much. Maybe Karen knows. But the friendship is not going to be super light in and breezy, I can imagine. Good point, Karen. And so, ordinarily you want to pay attention to these things and be nice about it, but not Trump. Maureen's comment here, difference between President Obama and Trump in the number of foreign trips taken in the first 6 months. Trump, of course, won a disaster. Obama forged lots of relationships on his trips. And that seems like it rings a bell for me, too. And, what my specific question, and who knows where you even go to find these things. Maybe Mark Knoller would know. He has counts of these things and keeps notebooks on it. How many world leaders were paraded through the Oval Office for photo ops with Obama in the same period of time? It really could be the same number. It's just those meetings didn't come to our attention because he didn't say anything astoundingly stupid in them, I don't think. Let's see. Here's another item from the Georgia race, which has got a lot of attention. Kate Sherrill sending us this piece from the Washington Post, their tweet reminding us that a Trump PAC, a Trump-affiliated PAC, or I guess a Trump-preferring non-affiliated PAC. I don't know. We'll take a look at the story and see are they super PACs and so therefore not affiliated, or is it just a regular PAC and it is in fact run by Trump or a Trump associate? We'll find out. But what's important is what they're doing. They're faking an appeal from Obama, using his voice apparently to lure black voters in Georgia to vote for the Republican there. Now, don't know how effective that's going to be, but it's certainly well outside the norms. Let's take a look at the Post story here, and let me make sure that it gets set aside so we can grab that link for later. A Trump PAC, fakes appeal from Obama to lure blacks to vote Republican in crucial Georgia race. Katie Metler, the writer here. I'd like to speak maybe to the headline writer about that one, but okay. In the 8th chapter of his 1995 memoir, Dreams from My Father, Barack Obama describes a barbershop haircut he got in Chicago in the 1980s just after he moved to the city for his new job as a community organizer. Obama's barber, named Smitty, speaks in the passage of the racial and political tension in Chicago before the city elected Harold Washington as its first black mayor in 1983, and the neglect African Americans felt from the Democratic Party at the time. In the paperback version of the book, Obama directly quotes Smitty's words. In the audio version, the audio book, obviously, Obama reads them aloud. Now, a pro-Trump super PAC, there's our answer, is using that passage from the first black president's book to lure black voters away from Democrats with a misleading attack ad targeting Georgia's 6th congressional district's special election. Great America Alliance, which brands itself as the largest and most effective pro-Trump super PAC, is among the many outside political groups pouring money into Tuesday's election, the most expensive congressional race in U.S. history, as the Washington Post's Robert Coster reported, and one that could have far-reaching consequences for Republicans nationwide. Just for a moment here, I'll interrupt to say that they are, they've got a tweet here, from the PAC, the Great America Alliance. And the Twitter handle is at Trump Alliance, which honestly probably would ordinarily raise coordination concerns. Do you recall that it was the finding of the FEC? If I remember correctly, the FEC was just a flat no on the question of whether or not a Carly Fiorina super PAC, Carly Fiorina supporting super PAC could name itself Carly. And I think they had ended up naming themselves, Carly for America or something like that. And they said, no, that's just too close to the bone there. You can't, our coordination rules forbid a super PAC from calling themselves the name of the person that they're independently supporting with no coordination whatsoever. That should probably fall on the Trump Alliance as well, although they call themselves the Great America Alliance and filed that way. Maybe that's the only difference at the moment. And is the FEC ready to say we also are allowed to control your Twitter name too? I mean, if you call yourself Trump Alliance on Twitter, is that indicative of some closer coordination than we would otherwise permit? I don't know if they've really reached that level of sophistication. It's pretty simple, open and shut, I would say, but I don't think they've gotten there yet. And even if they have, it's now too late. The damage has been done. Great America Alliance, which brands itself as the largest and most effective pro-Trump super PAC, blah, 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 has aired this ad, and it's embedded here. We could play it, but I don't know how much we're going to learn about it that we won't learn from the write-up. Democrat John Ossoff and Republican Karen Handel are in a dead heat for the seat, traditionally a stronghold for conservatives, which was vacated, as you know, by Tom Price when Trump appointed him Secretary of Health and Human Services. Ossoff has been highly critical of Trump. Handel, whom the president endorsed on Twitter Monday, has not. The results could serve as a roadmap for how Republican members of Congress should navigate their relationship with Trump during their own reelection campaigns. The district in the northern suburbs of Atlanta has been in Republican hands since 1979. The population is about 13% African American, but a turnout gap among black voters in 2016 and in the first round of the special election has Democrats worried, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is one of the reasons civil rights legend John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, has campaigned there for Ossoff. Great America Alliance's radio ad targets black voters by taking Smitty's words and Obama's voice out of context. The radio ad opens with a monologue from conservative political activist Autry Pruitt, a black man and Trump surrogate who often argues that Democrats have taken black voters for granted. And he's not wrong. He's just doing it for the wrong people. Hi, my name is Autry Pruitt, a fellow black American working hard every day just like you, Pruitt says. We'll see. I don't know how hard he's working. Anyway, it may seem out of season, but all of a sudden Democratic politicians have started coming around again. You'll see why. We normally only see them every other November, swarming around and making promises to get our vote. But nothing ever changes for us, does it? Here's what President Barack Obama had to say about it. Then Obama begins speaking, but the ad provides no context for his words. which we already now know thanks to this write-up. And the words are a plantation, black people in the worst jobs, the worst housing, police brutality rampant, Obama says. And again, he's not wrong, and neither is Smitty. But when the so-called black committeemen came around election time, we'd all line up and vote the straight Democratic ticket, sell our souls for Christmas turkey. Then Pruitt tells listeners not to sell out for another Christmas turkey. A video version of the ad turns the phrase into a hashtag. Take Obama's advice. It says, don't sell out for a hashtag Christmas turkey. But in the greater context of the memoir's 8th chapter, it's clear the words don't belong to Obama, and from Smitty, they take on a different meaning. Here is the full scene from Dreams from My Father. If you're interested in more context, let's see. Starts out here. Had to be here before Harold, Washington, to understand what he means to this city, Smitty said. Before Harold, seemed like we'd always be second-class citizens. Plantation politics, the man with the newspaper said. That's just what it was, too, Smitty said. A plantation. Black people had the worst jobs, the worst housing, police brutality rampant. But when so-called black committeemen came around election time, we'd all line up and vote the state Democratic tickets. This is the Christmas turkey line. White folks spitting in our faces, and we'd reward them with the vote. PolitiFact, a fact-checking publication run by the Tampa Bay Times, assigned the Great America Alliance ad its pants on fire rating for being misleading. Though a spokesman from the PAC said though, but I bet it's through. A spokesman from the PAC, Pruitt, told PolitiFact that the Obama quote was not taken out of context. The clip of President Obama was absolutely in context on this issue and helps make our point in the ad, which is why we used it, Pruitt said, according to PolitiFact. And it appears that that person who appeared from out of nowhere, Tomi Lahren, the blonde lady that is a super conservative talking head because something, and Fox proved it worked. I don't really know how she became famous. But anyway, she later got fired from the Glenn Beck operation because she was apparently pro-choice, and now she's apparently got work again. She's getting paid, I suppose, by one of these pro-Trump organizations, and so she's tweeting about this thing, about this commercial. Great America Alliance co-chair Eric Beach told CNN that the ad was an outside-the-box attempt to show creatively the Democrats' history with black voters. It's like any ad, Beach told CNN about the edited quote. Those are his words. They're not. And we want to use his words, and I'll leave it at that. Eric Schultz, senior advisor to Obama, told CNN that the use of the former president's voice in the ad was fraudulent and a shameful, indefensible tactic. Deceptively using President Obama's voice to suggest people sit out of the democratic process is a form of voter suppression, and it not only signals weakness, it runs counter to our American values. Schultz said, well, they don't care about that. But it does. In response to a tweet asking about the ad Monday night, Pruitt wrote, not an effort to suppress votes, it's an effort to get my fellow black Americans to run screaming from lying Democrats, hashtag Christmas turkey. A close call. I mean, I guess you could say, on the argument over context, I guess, I see his point that he's saying, no, I think it's not that it's out of context. Well, it is technically out of context, but it's not that the context being that there are plenty of black voters who recognize this inherent contradiction in the way the Democratic Party treats its most loyal supporters. I mean, it's true. And, I don't know. Do we have any listeners who don't really acknowledge that? I'd be surprised about that because, of course, we're always acknowledging it in terms of where progressives stand with the mainstream middle of the Democratic Party. We're very frequently shunted aside, and things are considerably better for your average white progressive liberal than they are for your average black progressive liberal in terms of return on investment, if your vote is your investment. So, I mean, it's not that it's without truth, and it's not that it's without context, but using Obama's voice that way without saying what it is, well, yes, okay, I get you. Good point. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Kate. And as you point out, it's election day right now, so if voters are fooled even for a moment by the time they find out the truth, it'll be too late. Very true. Okay, let's catch up on other comments. Let's see. Karen, following up on the Panama angle. What's a little invasion between friends? No one in Panama liked Noriega. They liked the U.S. invasion and subsequent instability less. Yes, I can imagine that. No one likes to have another country come in and remove their leader, particularly. Even when they hate their leader, they get jealous about sovereignty. It's weird. It's a thing people get upset about. Mad Hatter commenting that Obama had to deal with the economic meltdown, so a different atmosphere. I guess meaning that he would have spent considerably less time meeting foreign leaders for show, certainly. It may have been that there were obviously open in public whenever he met with leaders from other countries, but they weren't the centerpiece of his day because he was dealing with the economic meltdown. You're right. That's probably what was occupying most of his time. But I suspect that something else of substance would have been occupying most of his time regardless, and that he wouldn't have been doing this many staged events. But I'm just guessing on that. All right. Let's see. Other things that really ought to be brought up and noted before moving on. Norm Ornstein had an interesting tweet, which will add to the pile of complaints about the secretive process in the Senate and what can be done about it. Ornstein tweeting, "An ironic salute to all those reporters and pundits who have lauded McConnell for his devotion to the Senate's traditions, rules, and norms." Absolutely true. He was retweeting and commenting on Rick Hasen's tweet in which he had said, "Going to be a replay of how McConnell went nuclear to get Gorsuch through for the SCOTUS confirmation. Like that, repercussions for years." And that itself a response to Chris Hayes' tweet. So lots of discussion among the punditry of what's going on here. But Norm Ornstein's is always worth calling out in particular. And I thought it was very to the point. Ironic salute to everybody. A lot of media have spent a lot of time telling us what a Senate institutionalist McConnell is, and he's standing everything on its head. You know, he's got to get at least his vote. No doubt about that. Let's see. You know what we haven't discussed that much before I move on from the healthcare procedure. Some of this stuff I can't recall whether we talked about on the air. I've also had other discussions sort of behind the scenes, some of it public, some of it not, ironically enough, about how to deal with this in the process of slowing things down in the Senate. The Democrats certainly have the right idea in slowing things down. I'm glad that the view, if it ever even existed among Democrats in the Senate or their top aides, if it ever existed, the idea that Democrats, because the passage of this thing was essentially cemented by the option of using reconciliation, so that it couldn't be filibustered, and you only needed to clear the 50% threshold and do it once in order to get all the way through to passage. That Democrats should jump out of the way for some reason. Certainly the idea that they should jump out of the way in exchange for cooperation in the future on Trump probes seems ridiculous. But perhaps something else. There are probably other legislative matters on which there would be some limited possibility for bipartisan cooperation, and they thought that was somehow going to be jeopardized by jumping in the way of this AHCA, this tax reform bill or tax rebate bill. But this sort of thing happens all the time, and it's always a balancing game. In a normal Senate, there's the balance of, how much do I want to piss off the people I have to work with on other things? But these guys just don't work together anymore. And it's also very well understood that from time to time, the battle lines get drawn and the parties do what they have to do. And senators are aware of this and they can get past it. And if there's something that's really of bipartisan value to work on in the future, they're not likely to jeopardize it because it's something they want to be able to do, to accomplish and bring home for their constituents, and they're not going to throw it away because that guy from the other party voted the way the other party voted in its entirety on that one particularly partisan issue. They get past that pretty easily. So anyway, I thought I'd bring that up. The idea of making a deal seems stupid. Now the question of exactly what they can do about this. It will, of course, not delay things in any way for Democrats to have taken and held the floor for debate last night. But it is an important public showing of their interest in raising awareness of, one, the secretive process, and two, just how substantively bad this bill really can be. And they'll also be objecting to the ability of committees to meet for more than 2 hours while the Senate is in session. That's important in slowing things down as well, and just in creating annoyances and making it more difficult to schedule your day as a senator, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, and that gets in the way of regular order in a number of ways. But one of the other suggestions that I think we've given a little bit of attention to is, especially when the original goal was to push back final passage of this bill past the July 4th recess to give constituents in the home states of these Republican senators one more chance to pressure them not to pass this thing, on the assumption that they would talk to or even come close to any of their constituents or even return to their states during the recess. Then the notion of coming with an absurd, really, number of amendments to the bill for consideration in the last-minute vote-a-rama process that sometimes crops up on budgets. I don't know if I've ever really seen it on a reconciliation bill, but it was floated as a possibility. You might be able to push them late enough into the week next week that they say, we don't want to give up the recess, so we'll just resume steamrollering this thing through immediately following the July 4th recess. So in that sense, it wasn't really going to prevent the bill from coming to a final vote, whatever the outcome might have been. And so at first there were a couple of Democrats rumored to be lukewarm to the idea because they said, well, it doesn't really matter substantively whether we see this thing passed the week before July 4th or the week after July 4th. It's not effective the day it passes necessarily. Some of these things are phased in and phased out over a number of years. It's not going to make a difference 1 week or the next. Why not just move on? But people wanted to see a fight being staged, at least, just to let it slide by seems to be, I don't know why. It's certainly not inspirational in any way to rank and file Democrats. The question of whether the thing can be delayed indefinitely with amendments, well, that's really hard to imagine. I mean, theoretically, you could just keep offering amendment after amendment after. I could come up with literally a million amendments. You just make them such that you're changing a dollar amount in one portion of the bill and change it by 1 cent, change it by 1/10 of a cent every time, and just do it over and over and over again. It really doesn't matter that that there's no particular substantive difference between one amendment and the next. But then the question is, how long can you really go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, considering nothing but garbage amendments over and over? You can't really prevent passage this way.
There's no procedure where they can say no more amendments?
There is. I mean, that's, I guess, always lying out there as well. By the way, yes. Hi. Good morning, Armando.
Good morning.
I didn't mention that we were bringing you in here.
That's all right. They know I pop in every once in a while on my own volition.
So I left the door open and then he came. But, I mean, yeah, eventually they can make use of the rules or the latitude for making new rules that they've got to simply say, yeah, you know what? All further amendments are just dilatory. And they'll probably be right. As well. But I mean, you could mix it up so that there were some substantive ones in there too and say, how dare you call this substantive amendment? Well, anyway, they could simply say so. And if you pissed off, 50 of them, as you absolutely would with this kind of marathon, they would simply say, all right, we're going to rule them all dilatory and you can appeal the ruling and then we'll table your appeal and then we'll move on. They can do it. But again, it forces them at some point to say, the rules say, we do this all the time with these time-limited bills, not so much with reconciliation, but every year with a budget. And everybody knows that in the Senate you get to bring up whatever you want and you debate the amendments. But from now on, we're saying no more. And it forces a brief televised moment where they just say, we're not going to allow any more debate and no more suggestions and no more amendments. Everybody just shut up and do what we say. And they would be hoping to avoid that, but they can't. So they'll have that moment and they'll live it down and the thing will be passed. So the question is,
yeah, I mean,
how
don't
much
you think McConnell's past shame at this point? I mean,
yes, he is. But, so you stage it. Fine. It's one thing to say, well, he's beyond shame. And so therefore we won't shame him. Right.
I'm not saying don't do what you're suggesting. Make them do everything that you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing to do. The other thing, I will say this, I haven't publicized this quite as much, but I did get I think I mentioned it the other day because I got a suggestion, a very interesting suggestion, via Twitter. And, I may have mentioned it and I hope that when I mentioned it, I credited it, but, I may not have mentioned it. And it was from a couple of days ago and I've held it close since then because it really should be played a certain way, but I have no indication that they're considering it. But one of the things that they ought to think about at this point is they're using an extraordinary procedure. It's within the rules, Rule 14 to be specific, to move this bill directly from their secret working group to the floor. Ordinarily, of course, a bill gets introduced as working text and it's referred to committees and the committees mark it up and they debate it, they amend it, and then they report it out. The final product, according to the committee, is wrapped up in one final bundle and the report goes out. It's a very specific procedure and they vote on passing it and then they vote on the contents of the report, the minority views and majority views and the record of how it was considered, and it's all packaged up, and then they vote the report out, and the report moves forward and accompanies the bill to the floor. Under reconciliation, of course, we know that there's all sorts of crazy rules that they can sometimes interpret extremely strictly, and everybody focuses on the Byrd rule. But one of the things I've explained to everybody about reconciliation, it's kind of an extraordinary procedure and it has to run a certain way in order for you to be entitled to this expedited procedure that you can only debate it for X number of hours, which protects it from the filibuster. The deal is that, and I've told everybody this before, you have to first, in the budget resolution earlier in the year, specifically issue reconciliation instructions. You instruct certain committees to consider legislation that would produce savings of some target number. And ordinarily it's boilerplate stuff. They'll sometimes say, we don't know how much we're going to save with it, but let's say it has to be at least $1 million. They just put $1 million because anybody can save $1 million in Congress, believe it or not. So they pick some target number and they name the committees that are supposed to report out legislation that'll save that much money. And then those committees are instructed to meet, and their product is then forwarded to the budget committee if there's more than one committee that's got instructions. And the budget committee is then responsible for sewing the whole thing together. So in this case, for this bill, the Senate Finance Committee and the Senate Help Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, were instructed to find savings of, I don't know, it might have been $1 billion. And then those products were to go to the Senate Budget Committee, which would package them together and send the reconciliation bill to the floor. That's the product that would be entitled to reconciliation procedure protections from the filibuster. And it occurred to my correspondent that by using a ad hoc committee and formulating this legislation in secret and then using Rule 14 to move it to the floor, that none of the named committees in the budget resolution have reported anything. The legislation that's due now to come to the floor has not been considered by the Help Committee, nor reported by the Help Committee, has not been considered by the Finance Committee, nor reported by the Finance Committee, and has not in turn been considered by the Budget Committee, nor reported by the Budget Committee. And if you're a stickler for the rules, and aren't we all sticklers for the rules? The budget says the only bill that's entitled to reconciliation protections from the filibuster is one that gets reported by those three committees, and this hasn't been reported by them.
So we put that to a vote to the floor of the House to rule it whether it complies with the rules, and 50 vote it does, and
yeah.
Okay.
And so that
just
happens.
wondering.
So that's certainly a possibility. Although, some certain of these things, when you raise a point of order against them, it requires 60 votes to set aside the point of order. But that's only because the Senate rules and, as derived from, in some cases here, the Budget Act say so. But then again, you can also say, well, 50 of us say it doesn't say so. Well, but it does.
But if the Budget Act, if you can connect it to a piece of law, at least in theory, you can get to court.
Yeah, it's a possibility. And so I've brought that up, and so far the response has been kind of, well, we have top men working on it.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah, have they? Well, I'm sure they have looked at it because they're top men. Well, who's looking at it? Top men.
Yeah,
okay, well, could you just double check, because this is sort of an unusual situation. I don't believe I've ever seen a reconciliation bill move to the floor by Rule 14 before, because it's stupid. Who would contemplate it? It might actually be required by rule to not move it to the floor via Rule 14. And 2, there's never been any call for it. And 3, it's one of those things that to now you would never do, because you're talking about something that's protected from the filibuster. Senators would say, no, there's no way you can cut something that's protected from the filibuster out of the committee process. Are you kidding? When would we see it? Well, never. Oh, well, okay. Now that you put it that way. In that case, great.
Is there actually a requirement that the bill be shown before it's voted on?
Yes, somewhere along the line, it's supposed to be.
I mean, in a law.
In
the Constitution, anything.
No, I guess not. Unless, only by sort of a loose association that there's a constitutional requirement for a journal of proceedings.
Right.
To be published.
It would have to eventually be in the journal, but
yeah, but I guess you could say, well, the journal entry says there's been a bill introduced and it has to do with health care, and we're going to vote on it, and that's really all that's necessary.
Still, to pass, it still has to be published somewhere to become a law.
Yes, true, but not necessarily beforehand.
Can I take you to the next step?
All right.
Let's suppose we do all these things, we delay it, but it's mid-July or it's even August.
Mm-hmm.
And finally they're there and they went to conference and they came up with something. It goes back to the House, I think. Remind me. I mean, the new conference bill still has to be voted on because it's not the same bill.
Yeah, presumably not the same bill. There's probably some change, but we don't know yet. But
well, let's recall that. Remember when it was at the Affordable Care Act, the House had to vote on the exact same bill that
yes, if
was
there's
passed
any
in
change
the Senate
at all,
because we didn't have the votes anymore.
Right. If there's any change at all, there has to be another vote. Either just straight up considering will you accede to the changes or have a conference?
Okay. So my questions go, okay, so we go back to the House now, and let me connect this to Georgia 6 because that means, of course, the representative from the 6th District of Georgia will have to vote on whatever comes out.
Right. Yes, that's very likely true. So.
Right. And the last time in the House, there was a 217 votes favorable to it. It barely passed. Of course, there was no Georgia 6th representative at the time, so there was no vote, but I believe the majority number moves up by one when this Georgia 6th representative is seated. If it is John Ossoff, that's one more vote in the negative.
Mm-hmm.
So they really, I think, get to the point where they can only lose one vote from what they've already had.
Yes, it was very close the first time. And of course, circumstances have changed somewhat, and they might just squeak by again. But yeah, if
I
all the
think it's
votes remain
tougher
the
because a
same.
lot of them, the votes said, well, we just wanted to keep the process moving. I know that was Carlos Curbello's excuse and a few others. The instigator of all this, one Tom MacArthur, is going to be in a tough race. Be interesting to see where he ends up on this.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that people should remember it goes back to another vote. And while you want to think about Georgia 6 in context of 2018, it could be important to 2017 and the American Health Care Act, also known as Trump Care.
Yeah. Very true, and they should absolutely. I mean, I would think that would be uppermost in most people's mind. Ironically, it probably never occurred to them that there wouldn't be that wouldn't be one of the first votes that they took, even though they're, under ordinary circumstances, it would be like, well, no, it's too late. You missed your opportunity to vote on that. But he's been campaigning on it for so long that probably the generalized assumption is that he's going to go, if he were to win, he would go immediately to Washington and vote no.
I would assume, and I assume she's a yes vote, and I think that issue is fairly clear. It seems to me, in the district and outside the district. It's funny that no one thinks about it because everyone's talking about it, what it means for 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think it means as much as anybody, as most people. I think 2018 is 15 months from now. You never know what's going to be the big issues then.
Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to mention about the conference process. So we're in August. I'm putting it in August. They've got a conference bill. Something awful has been agreed to. It passes the House by a vote or 2 votes or 5 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Comes to the Senate. Has to be CBO scored, correct?
Well, where are we talking about in this process here?
Okay, the Senate passed its bill.
Senate passes its bill like next week.
They went to conference.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. If they go to conference, yes, then a conference report has to be passed by both houses.
That conference report has to comply with the Byrd Rule.
Yes.
All right, so they need a CBO score.
Yeah.
All right. And so sometime between the House voting on it and the Senate voting on it, the House doesn't care about CBO scores. We know that already.
Right.
But the Senate is bound by law to care about the CBO score. They get it. Somehow it squeaks by. But if it doesn't, isn't there, what happens if the parliamentarian comes to this conference report and they do the bird bath thing again,
mm-hmm.
and they have to take things out? Then that House vote is invalidated, correct?
Well, essentially, yes. I mean, it just means that there's nothing wrong with the vote itself, but
well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, but
I see what you mean. Yeah,
but
they would have to work on it again
and
do it over. Again, assuming everybody's going to, obey the rules, etc. Yes, then at that point, somebody needs to.
But see, I always think the Byrd Rule is different because it's enshrined in law. That's the one thing that I think makes it somewhat makes it different.
It gives you the opportunity to see, can I force my way into court with this, and in ways that the others don't. So
yeah.
Now,
I know there are people going to argue standing and whatnot, but it's a law. I mean, somebody has to have standing. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yes, you would hope. Otherwise, you don't really have much of a law.
I believe a Democratic senator who believes the Byrd Rule or the Budget Act is being violated has standing because he has a party and interest in that he has assumed and operated under the Byrd Rule and has the right and expectation to expect it. And, they gave here's the thing I would say about that. Remember when the House created some committee or conference to sue about something or other, and the Supreme Court said that was standing. I always thought the entire House of Representatives, or the entire Congress, would need to have standing. But they've already said no to that.
Okay.
Remember, they said the House standing alone has standing.
Yeah.
Now, of course, they also have that percentage case where an individual rep doesn't have it. But that was different to me because that did not involve a law that impacted how the Senate itself or the House operated. It was about, as I recall, it was the Kosovo case. Do you remember that?
Not offhand, but
case I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm taking you on tangents you don't even care about. But I'm just curious about this whole process of going to conference and coming back. You're right. They'll probably get all their ducks in a row and they'll try to figure out if they have enough votes. But it's so close on both sides that I don't know how tight you can make that.
Yeah. By the way, Mad Hatter pointing out that Jason Chaffetz is gone shortly. Who knows what the status of Steve Scalise is and whether he can make it back for a vote. And I mean, really, in a situation where every vote counts, those are problematic. So, okay, just other ones to track. A lot of moving parts in the House.
Yeah, I mean, I know the short-term focus is how do we slow this down to a crawl, and I'm all for that. And frankly, there's just no downside to it. There is a downside to not doing it.
Yes.
You want your people to think you're fighting every step of the way, whether it's going to succeed or not. Mm-hmm. The message has to be sent.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so, and I think most close watchers of it are coming to the same conclusion.
Yeah, I think Schumer's there, right?
Yeah, well, certainly that's why we see what's going on now, and this may or may not pan out in the amendments game, but they're certainly putting up what struggle they can now before consideration begins. It doesn't, and it won't delay things, but they're just getting out there and having the debate that there ought to be, but it's being prevented by Republicans. Of course, I still think they should take advantage of the fact that it's secret and just say whatever the hell you want about the bill. Say it as, every American
absolutely.
Has to
I
be
mean,
poisoned.
it's got death panels, for example.
Right, sure. No, it doesn't. How do you know? You've never seen the bill.
Show
what are
me.
you talking about? Yeah. Bring it out. But, yeah. They're doing what they can do now.
Which apparently they do show it to the lobbyists.
Yes, well, that seems like nothing new there. But, yeah, they probably do.
Nothing new at all.
But, yeah, they should be, they need to have this fight. They need to stand up and say these things now. And then we'll see whether they're able to, whether they come up with any amendments or a flurry of amendments to do these things, or whether there's any sort of objection to the procedure. One of my only objections to their announcement of their plan going forward, the Democrats, in the last day or two, was that they would be making a number of unanimous consent requests that they knew Republicans would never agree to, and that's fine in concept. But one of the ones that they were asking for was unanimous consent to commit the text of the bill to committee for debate that we didn't have. We should absolutely have that debate, and we should be demanding that we have that debate. And so what's your problem with that? And my only answer is, well, I'd like to have an answer first on whether or not we can have a point of order against the entire bill because it wasn't considered by committee. And if you make the unanimous consent request that repairs that defect, I'd like to have an answer before you make that request. You know what I mean?
Right.
But, no answer so far. But again, the answer could just be, the parliamentarian doesn't really care.
Is it interesting to you at all that McConnell himself objected to all the unanimous consent requests last night as opposed to having various members do it?
Not other than by saying, I've agreed to take all the heat for this.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, though? Because they all come out and say, I wish we were more transparent.
Yes, right.
So McConnell has agreed to be the Darth Vader of this movie.
Yeah.
And
they all get to
somehow
complain.
they think this all inoculates them. I don't understand the theory of it.
Well, I guess your average voter, right? Well, I was very upset about the secret process. That really bothered me. And you know what? It bothered me too. Here's a package of press clips of me saying, boy, does this bother me. And most people aren't able to say, well, okay, that's true, but why didn't you simply hold out and say, I'm just a hard no on this bill until we have hearings? It's just beyond the average voters. It's not that they can't comprehend it, it's they don't think of it on their own. If they haven't read it someplace, then they don't know that necessarily that individual senators can do that. They don't know what the vote count was. They don't know how closely divided the Senate is. They forget. They might have heard about it being considered under reconciliation, but I don't know. I thought the Senate was like 54-46 or something. So what are you going to do? Not that it was 52-48 and that there were two possible no votes. They don't know that.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, suppose you believe it's 54-46. That means 5 people. So apparently 49 of them are okay with it.
Yeah. And they are, but yeah, like I said, your average voter, a lot of people have no idea how many people there are in the Senate, if you ask around, or they think, I thought that was the House that they were talking about. I just didn't pay attention to that part of it. I know I opposed it, in substance. I know that the secret process that got reported, I noticed that was bad, but then here's, there's like 10 newspaper clippings saying my senator said it was also bad. So I guess we're in agreement and, the fight doesn't go any further for most people.
Yeah, I get that. I actually think that it's, it's not a pleasant insight, but I don't think people vote that much on stuff like that. I think they vote mostly on identity and, people pretend. Look, to me, there's nothing more telling than Russia, how everybody has been about Russia.
Yes.
Now Russia's not the worst thing in the world. I mean, before it was, evil. And, Russia was always evil. It's just a question of what we do with them. Mm-hmm. Not evil. I think that's an unfortunate phrase by me.
Well, you're borrowing from Ronald Reagan. It's a very noble phrase. You're a true American.
Yeah.
Evil empire.
And that was then, and we could have argued about what it meant then. But, it was just that Putin is a real a real concern to our national interest, simply because he may be, in his own mind, pursuing Russian interests, or maybe just pursuing his personal interests. But, Russia's a real flashpoint for us in Europe and in the Middle East and in the Far East. So it's hard to accept tribalism, as Greg Dworkin often puts it, that explains how people feel about issues. That's why I'm always very skeptical of issue polling. Oh, well, so-and-so says this. Well, wait till their party tells them what they're supposed to think, and you'll see they'll change. Well,
sure. We started the show reading the 2010 tweets from John Cornyn and Mike Pence. and you'll likely find tweets or speeches from Democrats saying, we've been debating healthcare in this country for 40 years. It's not a lack of consideration going ahead with the Affordable Care Act at this point, and I guess you could twist that as well, although there was still several hundred hearings and a year's worth of consideration, but for the Affordable Care Act versus this, nothing.
Yeah, here's the thing. If Trump particularly had said anything of substance about what he wanted in the health care bill, it would be in there, presumably.
Yeah. Well, all he said was that we were going to do something great. So,
Yeah, he doesn't know anything. I mean, beyond every other horrible thing he's a complete ignoramus about any issue.
Well, sure. And, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, Trump cares about this or that. He cared about the wall, and, where's that, by the way?
Yeah. I don't know. Everybody shut up.
Exactly, where's that wall?
So, yeah, that's, all right. Well, I've got a couple other items on this, by the way.
And
but
if you want me to drop off, I'm good with that.
Oh, well, it's not that I want you to. I'm going to move on to these other items, but you can feel free to comment on them.
If I have something to say, I will.
Okay.
I'll be here to criticize you if you say something I don't agree with.
Okay. And I will say I wanted to try to get to one of our pre-recorded segments from Rosalind McGregor.
Oh, Rosalind. Haven't heard from her for a while. That'd be great.
On to that. But I'll throw this one out, I guess, sort of close out the Republican bill coverage this way. Well, actually, I'll first recommend, rather than read through, a piece from the LA Times. I just will mention its headline. So to pique your interest in it, we'll read it elsewhere. Unbelievable. Senate Republicans planning even deeper cuts to Medicaid than the House Republican bill. So that's a warning sign for you. Red flashing light. So once we finally get the text of this thing, it may turn out to be deeper cuts to Medicaid than even the terrible, too mean, as you'll recall Trump saying about it, House bill. But I wanted to bring up this to kind of close things out. And it's always good to close things out with Brian Beutler, writing in the little short piece minutes section of the New Republic, just reminding people, if Democrats don't ultimately stop this bill, don't stop the Trump care, don't call it a failure. So sort of expectation setting, but I think realistic in this sense. In response to activist pressure and the deafening silence of major media organizations, Senate Democrats will step up tactical pressure on Republicans to show their secret health care bill to the public. It's not a health care bill, but okay. Beginning Monday night, Politico reports, Democrats will start objecting to all unanimous consent requests in the Senate. They plan to control the floor of the chamber Monday night and try to force the House-passed bill to committee in a bid to further delay it. Because Republicans are attempting to pass their Obamacare repeal through a filibuster-proof process, Democrats can only stop it by weakening Republican resolve. Their tactics thus operate on two related channels. First, increase public pressure to release the bill text and open up the legislative process. Second, delay Republicans' final vote as long as possible so that the scrutiny has time to take a political toll on individual lawmakers. That's pretty key. But the entire approach is premised, quite rightly, on the understanding that 50 Republican senators can pass a terrible bill as long as their determination to pass something exceeds their political fear, or their fear of political blowback. It is of critical importance to people who are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act and to Democrats who must be responsive to their constituents that Senate Democrats try anything to stop the health care bill, but it is just as important that beneficiaries, activists, and others outside the process understand that even a perfectly executed opposition campaign, complete with huge rallies, sit-ins, dilatory tactics, and an effective media strategy, won't necessarily work. Just as it wasn't, ultimately, within Democrats' power to stop Republicans from confirming Neil Gorsuch, it isn't necessarily in their power to stop Trump care. As important as it is for Democrats to get caught trying to stop the secret Republican health care bill, it is just as important that honest people don't confuse failure with capitulation. I think that's a key point. I know exactly who we're probably talking about here, who will use this eventual, running out of options to say, well, Democrats as a party are just useless. Either abandon them or burn it to the ground or rebuild it from the ground up or substitute it for, my people for those people, and everything will be different. But, reconciliation is a tough nut to crack. It's been used abusively a number of times by Republicans in ways that can be stopped if you, every once in a while resort to a nuclear option of your own. But all of those nuclear options have effects far out into the future too. There's just sometimes no way to stop things like this and all you can do is highlight the tragedy of it and hope people will build off of that. At some point it falls to the rest of us to do the voting that needs to be done. Part of the filibuster reform effort, part of it was to kind of strip away these sort of the insulation that voters and activists and senators themselves have in the legislative filibuster by, saying you can afford to lose more elections or to not stay focused and not constantly be organizing public pressure campaigns, because the filibuster will take care of it. They'll never get to the 60. And it should really be, people need to be of the mindset that, look, if the other party gets the majority, they're going to do the things you want to avoid and to you. And don't let that happen. Win every race that you can. Fight every fight that you can. So anyway, I thought a good warning from Brian on that front. Let's see. Michael Musson asking a question. Say the AHCA passes and both chambers flip, I guess, in the next election. Can McConnell do anything in the current bill to prevent Congress from undoing it? That's a highly technical question. I don't know what he's got. Of course, we don't know what's in this bill, but there are certainly, or I guess I would say presumably, things you can do that would make it very difficult to undo some parts of it, just as it's been difficult, if not impossible, to undo certain parts of Obamacare because they were designed to re-engineer programmed non-discretionary spending, and that's just harder to pull out by the roots. But for the most part, no, there's nothing that would prevent a Democratic Congress post-2018 from undoing that. But, of course, undoing a tax, what amounts to a tax cut, is not a particularly easy thing to do either, even if it's targeted correctly. So I'll put that out there. All right, Armando, was there anything you needed to add to
No,
this? But
everything I've agreed with so
all
far.
right.
So
Well,
I always pitch in when I disagree.
Okay. Well, I'll take this opportunity then to wrap for the moment on this and call up I've got 3 segments waiting from Rosalind, 2 on the fields shaping up for the gubernatorial race in Michigan in 2018, and 1 more direct on policy on teacher pensions. I think we'll start with the teacher pensions thing and maybe make a feature of the gubernatorial race stretched out a little bit longer. But don't know if that's something ordinarily I don't really comment on what you got. But,
no, I mean, I know I saw the announcement on the Michigan governor
Yeah.
race of one candidate who sounded very promising. I just don't know what's happening in Michigan anymore. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hang up and just listen to Rosalind, who does know what's happening in Michigan.
I would hang up too, but I have to. Yeah, I have to close the show afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, at this
Someone
point,
has to
let's
close
listen to
that shop.
Rosalind.
Let's do that.
She can tell us about Michigan because I don't recall you being an expert on Michigan. Maybe
no.
if you boned up, but I certainly am not.
No, there's no way to catch up. I'm going to go with the teacher pensions. That seems like a bit more of my speed at the moment. And we've got a little bit of time, I guess, on the 2018 gubernatorial race.
Yeah,
so
that's for sure.
Rosalind McGregor, our thanks,
All right,
Armando.
David. Have a good
Take
one.
care, and talk to you again probably during the week. Rosalind McGregor, our correspondent from Michigan, and a good reminder, every time I play one of her pieces here, that this option is available to any of you. I would love to have your contributions. Keep them to, especially if you can keep them to a couple of minutes. Pick up a local story. It doesn't even have to be a local story. I mean, it's great if that's your interest, but if it's a national story, that's okay. I happen to cover national news, and you don't have to leave it to me to cover national issues. I don't know any more than you do about it. I don't know what's in your head about it. That's the whole point. Sit down, read the article, read no article. Just tell me what's on your mind, I guess. We like to have articles. If you're going to be reading things, certainly we like to be able to give people the link to look at the article and read it for themselves afterwards, or they may find your argument so persuasive that they need it as source material themselves for their own work. But sit down, record it on your smartphone, and email us the resulting file, and it's easy to find me, Kagrox, Kagrox @gmail.com. No secret there. I'm not hiding it from the world like they're hiding this tax bill. And soon you will be on the radio just like Rosalind McGregor is going to be in 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Good afternoon, David. I have an article today about the budget fight in Lansing and how Michigan's teachers are caught in the crossfire between Republican factions. From the Detroit News, Republican Governor Rick Snyder and GOP legislative leaders agreed in concept on a compromise teacher pension reform deal that would steer new hires towards 401k-style retirement savings plans, but retain a hybrid pension option. Snyder confirmed the tentative framework Thursday as he left a closed-door meeting with Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekhoff and House Speaker Tom Leonard, who called it a tentative agreement. We still need to continue to work some things out, but I think it provides a better retirement for school employees, Snyder told reporters. The pending deal sets the stage for a final budget deal by the end of June, Snyder said. Republican legislative leaders had frozen the governor out of budget negotiations when he refused to back their initial teacher pension reform legislation. Meekhoff of West Olive and Leonard of DeWitt had been pushing to close the 2010 hybrid pension system to new hires, citing the risk of adding $29.1 billion in unfunded liabilities associated with the state's legacy pension system. But the hybrid plan is fully funded on paper. Snyder opposes closing it and had balked at steep transition costs associated with leadership's previous proposal, which the House Fiscal Agency estimated could cost an additional $410 million in fiscal year 2019 and more than $46 million over a 40-year period. The developing plan would stop short of closing the hybrid plan to new hires, but may include a trigger to force closure under certain circumstances. So those are the cold facts. For more on how this will really play out comes this editorial from Inside Politics, Susan Demas. Let me help you skip to the end of the story. Yes, of course Michigan will kill pensions for teachers. And I'll tell you why. Governor Rick Snyder wants the state budget done, and when push comes to shove, he rarely fights for the right thing. All you have to do is remember how he's folded on right to work, unnecessary abortion restrictions, and the anti-LGBT adoption law. And for good measure, consider how much Snyder has tried to ingratiate himself to President Donald Trump, who's only delighted in humiliating the governor because he made a big show of being too principled to endorse him. Then there's the budget. The first thing you have to know is that ending the pension system is not critical to passing next year's budget. It's not going to save us money. To the contrary, the House Fiscal Agency says it would cost us $46.2 billion over 40 years to shutter the system. So using the pension as cover is just about legislative leaders exercising leverage. They considered springing the pension issue during the lame duck session last December, when Republicans were totally pumped up after their big electoral win. But you've got to hand it to Senate Majority Leader Arlen Meekhoff and company. Holding the budget hostage over this issue that so delights their donors is a great idea from a purely political standpoint. Our CPA governor can't stand that. You see, Snyder is a businessman. He is a strong fiscal steward, and the budget has always been done by early June because of the great Michigan comeback and the fact that we no longer have divided government, so Republicans basically do whatever they want. But Snyder is a lame duck governor, and a very unpopular one at that, so this is an excellent time for conservative Republicans to push him on an issue that is not, we should stress, critical to the budget's passage. But it's on the wish list of right-wing groups like American for Prosperity Michigan and part of the education reform lobby's all-out assault on teachers and public education. So everyone's a winner. I mean, except Michigan teachers whose salaries are stagnating and enrollment in teacher prep programs has dropped precipitously, a trend that's only likely to accelerate. Why? Since Snyder has taken office, he's made it a fairly miserable experience to be a teacher. Budget cuts, charter school expansion, and attacks on teacher tenure make conservative interest groups happy. But let's get real. Anti-electoralism is all the rage in Republican Party led by Trump. His education secretary, big GOP donor Betsy DeVos, is moving heaven and earth to privatize more of our educational system, and teachers' unions are a big bulwark for Democrats. So teachers will probably lose this fight in Michigan and many others on a national scale. If you read history, societies that don't value education and vilify intellectuals tend to be subjected to some pretty terrible things. Luckily for us, school history requirements will probably soon be replaced by watching reruns of The Apprentice, so everything will turn out swell. There you have it, David. Back to you.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty dim view of the future, but, I can't say it's not grounded in reality, or at least grounded in reality television. Thank you, Rosalind, for that contribution. I guess it was afternoon when you were recording that. I have that happen to me all the time, right? Although I make such a conscious effort of it. I'm recording and this is the date. Yeah, tough one. Well, of course it's morning here, but it was afternoon when you recorded. We forgive you, of course, and eventually it will be afternoon. Only got to wait an hour and 10 minutes until that's true. I should have waited, stretched the show out and done a special extended session. As a matter of fact, Maureen was asking that question. Let me see if I understand the question here. For our Kagro in the morning, for the executive producer, which is of course me, with contributors, great effort that they put into the pieces that may be upended by events. Can special podcasts be done to include those? Oh, I guess we could always come up with some sort of special podcast. I'm not sure when I would be able to air the thing. I'm sure we could shoehorn it somehow into the schedule, but who knows when. Over at Netroots Radio for them to play on the air. And we could, of course, I guess we could also, we could always just post those podcasts. That would be maybe something to do that'd be an interesting thing to do for premiums for people who are contributors via Patreon. But I hate to wall things off. But I guess we could always just post the thing and do that. And I've given some thought to that. And some of these times when I have to pre-record an episode, I've thought, well, what if it was the bulk of it was listener contributions? Although I've wondered whether that would sound disjointed or not to our listeners. But we could certainly give it a try. I try not to let things slide for that long, and Rosalind is usually free to, everyone's free to do it, and Rosalind usually reminds me, well, these things need to be played in the next couple of weeks because otherwise they may be overtaken by events. And I hope she didn't suggest which one had to go first. So I hope I haven't done these in reverse order. But you can certainly put an expiration date on those things. And I have had that happen occasionally. And as I'm thinking of it now, John R. in Texas has given us a couple of things that we've just let events get in the way. It's not that events in the state upended what happened, but there was just so much Trump craziness that we couldn't find time to get to these things. And sometimes it's usually my fault. I end up talking my way all the way through, believe it or not, 2 hours, and then finding myself rushed at the end and saying, I meant to get to that contributors segment. But I try not to let them sit for too long. But I'm certain we could probably work something else extra into it, and or maybe even give a dedicated contributors only bonus show that we post after Friday, and see whether there's any real interest in that additional bonus download for the day. All right. Well, let's see. A good suggestion, something worth considering. We can change things up as the executive producer, such as it is, of the program. I guess I reserve the right to be able to say, sure, we're going to have special versions of it. If you ask for it, we can do it. Then, of course, somebody has to come and do the work, and that's me. But I'm willing to do it. Let's see. Any other items that needed immediate mention before we wrap up and hand things over to the guys taking over for the after show? Well, let's see. One short item. Plenty of Trump craziness that we need to get caught up on, but I was glad to spend the time on the tax bill and health care repeal and some education about reconciliation that went on today. I think the time was well spent. Pete B2 thinks the same. What an education I got today on KITM about the reconciliation process. We love to do it there. And by the way, I should mention the correspondent who brought up to me the possibility that there might be something wrong with using the reconciliation procedure because of the failure of the named committees to make their required reports. This may not be the case, but I like to think that we catch such things because we create a larger community of people who understand the rules. A show like this makes it possible for 1,000 different brains to be processing this stuff and to crowdsource the procedural red teaming of something this complicated. I like to think that we're making it possible. It may, in fact, be the case that it never would have been possible but for writing and radio programming like this. Anyway, the one other thing I wanted to squeeze in, besides tooting our own horn here, although it makes a good reminder for everybody to contribute at our patreon.com page to keep this sort of programming going. I wanted to switch gears and just throw in one more thing. Our good friend Dana Hool tweeting this morning that he was rereading a piece from Evan Osnos, a staff writer at the New Yorker, from September of last year and caught this little tidbit, which I think needs to be on the record, that the idea to ban travelers by country as opposed to banning Muslims generally might have, well, it was certainly designed to make, they thought that the executive order would pass legal muster that way, and not run into constitutional problems about discrimination by religion if he banned countries instead. And that, I guess we've all sort of attributed that to Miller and or Bannon. This piece, this excerpt anyways, tends to suggest that it might have come from Roger Stone, of all people. I'll pick it up in the middle of this excerpt that's included here in this tweet. In his view, America is doing too much to try to solve the world's problems. We're talking about Roger Stone here. I guess trade agreements are damaging the country, or maybe it's Stone talking about Trump. Trade agreements damaging the country. Immigrants are detrimental to it. He wanders and hedges and doubles back, but he is governed by a strong instinct for self-preservation and never strays too far from his essential positions. Roger Stone, a long-serving Trump advisor, told me, it is a mistake to imagine that Trump does not mean to fulfill his most radical ideas. Maybe, in the end, the courts don't allow him to temporarily ban Muslims, Stone said. That's fine. He can ban anybody from Egypt, from Syria, from Libya, from Saudi Arabia. He's a Reagan-type pragmatist. That's Roger Stone's description of Donald Trump. And, of course, Reagan wasn't that much of a pragmatist, and Donald Trump is nothing like Reagan anyway, and is stupid in his own right and doesn't need to be compared to Reagan. But what an interesting find. I thought a good one, and maybe we could pocket that one. Not exactly sure what to do with that particular piece of information, but fascinating nonetheless that this might somehow have come from Roger Stone. Also in the mix, probably Rudy Giuliani, early on named as a source for this approach to the travel ban. Anyway, no surprise here. Neither approach passed legal muster or constitutional muster with the courts, and they're all very dumb, the people who put this thing together. But anyway, I just thought that was another puzzle piece that we ought to add. Now time to roll our outgoing music here, our outro, as we like to call it, and to remind you to stay tuned for the after show and catch up on all the things that we had to set aside for the day in order to teach you yet more about the reconciliation process, Senate procedure, and various other tidbits that we found along the way. Red Sky at Morning Tuesday, that's what they like to call the Tuesday show. Coming up next, Karen Handel is pretty damn proud of her record of keeping people from voting, it turns out, and we'll hear more about that. The response by many Republicans and the right-wing media to the Virginia shooting underscore their white supremacist and misogynist values. And a secret cache of Nazi loot, how exciting, with possible ties to infamous Nazi Dr. Joseph Mengele, is seized in Argentina, where I guess it's been sitting, I don't know who knew about it back then, but it's amazing that they keep turning these things up. Sounds like an intriguing story. Hang on for that. For the last half, they'll visit with Chris Reeves, who you may know as Tom Servo 433, for a discussion on Senate Democrats seizing the floor last night to protest the McConnell so-called health care bill secrecy. And today's other special election in Frank Underwood's district in South Carolina also matters, and what Republicans got wrong about the social safety net. All that, plus, of course, the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast community calendar, and more on the after show next with Wink and Justice. Stay tuned.
From Daily Coast Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for listening once again. If you enjoyed today's education about reconciliation as much as Pete B2 did, you can do something about it to make sure that more people hear it and more people are educated enough to find these things on their own and bring them to the attention of the powers that be, even though I'm not one of them, by contributing to our Patreon fund. We'll see you tomorrow.